Alright, it's time to look at the Dungeon Master's Guide. So, you got two choices. You got the regular Dungeon Master's Guide and the limited edition cover. I pretty much always recommend pick up this one first, and if you want both, so to use this one regularly and this one to display on the shelf, or you just like having both, pick this one up later, because this one, so far, none of them have been reprinted, so you can only get them usually around release week. Some go for longer because the books didn't sell well. I think Tasha's you were able to get the collector's box thing even for a very long time. Might still be on shelves. It'll disappear soon, so if you do want that, you should probably pick that up. Maybe it might be discounted again on Black Friday, but probably not because there's not much stock of it left. But this stuff, just out. It'll be out November 12th. It's a release date. So we'll go through the Dungeon Master's Guide and see what's what. Kind of like how we went through the Player's Guide. Yeah, so I'm going to talk more about the individual chapters. I didn't do that with the Player Guide because it's fairly straightforward and it's more rules-based, and you follow that and you make a character, and you sometimes refer back to the Player's Guide, but often it's mostly for character creation, and this is more about running the game, and it starts with, the basics, then running the game, and then your DM's toolbox. Chapters 4 is creating adventures and creating campaigns, and then bastions, and then tracking sheets, maps. So the old Dungeon Master's Guide was more of a, I guess, esoteric tome of how to think about the game, and then also a lot of the back half of the book was all treasure and that kind of stuff. This seems more designed around teaching you how to play the game in book form, and I think heavily probably influenced by both Critical Role and the popularity of it, and people's desire to learn how to run the game, as seen by the number of views on Matt Colville videos, which he produced quite a bit of, and a lot of, basically the community sort of owes a debt to Matt Colville for doing that, even if it did benefit him monetarily and gave him the ability to put out his own Kickstarters and products and that sort of stuff. But he really did influence how people think about running the game, and more importantly, passing that knowledge on to other people. And that's what this book seems to be more like doing, where this is talking about knowing the group that you're with and resolving things, and then you go to the DM's toolbox and how to create the fake, or I guess the imaginary things in that people are going to encounter. And then this is about how to create a story around that, and an adventure is a mini story, and then you go out to the macro, and the campaign setting has all those things, and it's multiplied across, the globe or whatever type of world that you have, and the campaign is a lot of interlocking adventures, and the adventures are a lot of interlocking things that you've created fictionally, right? And then you go into more like what the old Dungeon Master's Guide had with the cosmology, which was a huge chapter in the old Dungeon Master's Guide, and I don't think it captured a lot of people. Like, I think people basically saw that and they're like, I don't have time for that, and they skipped over it. So they've made a much smaller thing, and you can go back to the old Dungeon Master's Guide to get a much more enlarged view of this cosmology idea and the multiverse and that kind of stuff, right? And then you got treasures, and it goes from page 212 to page 312. There's about 100 pages. I think I think it's less than what the original Dungeon Master Guide. You'll have to check me on that. And then Bastions. This is definitely influenced by Matt Colville, because his first product was about this idea of having your own base camp or fortress or just area that you owned. And in fact, my first campaign back to Dungeons & Dragons back in 2014, 2015, I had already started thinking of that idea, and then of course Matt Colville was on that idea, that he we all had this idea of having your own home bases and areas that you controlled, and there were never any formalized rules around that, except maybe with Birthright, but I don't know. This is what Matt Colville says. I never read Birthright, but it was always very complicated to create your own rules around that. And I even had the castle guide for second edition, and it didn't. Those were not. Those are rules about how to build a castle and the costs of building a castle, which is very interesting, but didn't help you create the setting needed for your characters to get invested in that and for it to be part of the whole of the story, right? So these bastions, it's about what, 30 pages, so not quite as big as was it Strongholds and Followers from Matt Colville, which I think you should pick up because it can really flesh out what this Bastions is talking about. And then of course maps. I don't think they did any map creation in the Dungeon Master's Guide from 2014. But this sort of gives you some basic maps and gives you ideas by seeing them on how to draw your own maps. But of course there's lots of resources online now that you can basically subscribe to people on Patreon and get like regular maps from them and use them in Roll20 or print them out and use them yourself. And there's lots of tools for you to create your own maps online, so that's pretty great. And then tracking sheets, yeah, so all that's very good in the basics. You know, what does a DM do, and you know, basically how to start thinking about how run the game, like how to run the game, but also how to think about what you're doing, right? Because it isn't, especially as a dungeon master, it's a exercise in critical thinking constantly, right? So you got to think about what you're doing, what's going to happen because of what the players are doing, what's happening while the players aren't there to the NPCs. That's a little bit maybe more advanced that a lot of dungeon masters aren't thinking of, like how is their world chugging along on its own without the players interacting in even areas that your players may never even go to, you know, that sort of thing. And then where we'll get to the running the game. This is more the specifics of what to do and how to do them, and this is very good for new dungeon masters, but old dungeon masters, I'm sure there's going to be some great little tips in there, because this is all of this stuff is based on people's experiences and sharing their experiences and sharing their knowledge on how to run and stuff, and all that stuff has converged over time, and everyone's influenced by everyone else, and this guide is no different. The people that have designed it have likely seen a lot of the regular players, famous players, and adapted those ideas to how to run the game, right? So then, you know, it just gives you the tools you need, and then here's some more tools, basically choosing how to create different things for your campaign, for your players, and how to think outside the box, that sort of stuff. And then where are we at here? Yeah, so this is talking about firearms and explosives. Is this a new? I don't think this is the next thing. No, we're still on toolbox. All right, and then these are, I guess we're getting into, what is it, the tracking sheets? So settlement tracker. Not sure what that is, but I can guess you're basically creating a sheet that lets you sort of organize a settlement and think about it while your players aren't there again. Like basically what is the theme of this settlement and how you're gonna do it. So then these are different things that you can throw in it. So I think we're still in this must be the adventure stuff. So yeah, okay, so creating adventures. So this is your first step. You create one little adventure, and Matt Colville has a great one where you start off in a town, you end up near a crypt that's run by goblins, and there's some sort of cult that you got to stop, and that's the adventure. And then you chain a bunch of those adventures together, and it becomes a campaign. And so this is how to create the campaign, and then of course beyond that is the campaign setting, the whole world, how everything interacts and interlocks and that sort of stuff. And this tells you how to, you know, starting location, first adventure, how to plan adventures. And you don't have to do all the stuff up front. You just have to create one little adventure and then your players like it and they want to continue, and by them playing you realize what they enjoyed the most, and your next adventure can push them further in the direction of the stuff they enjoyed, and then also the direction of maybe some story things that you've started to think of. But don't overdo it if you don't have the time. If you do and you like overdoing it, then overdo it. But if you don't, then you don't have to. It's just adventure by adventure by adventure. And then of course this is Greyhawk, the original campaign setting that, you know, it existed before there was campaign settings. It was basically Gary Gygax's castle with a dungeon underneath where his players went, and then was it Castle Black? I don't know. The Dave Arneson had his own, like, and he was the one that had that first idea, and then Gary Gygax used that for Castle Greyhawk, and then Greyhawk became an entire world. So that's the thing, is like it was just one little castle with one little dungeon underneath, and then Gary Gygax over time expanded to this, right, and to a whole lot, and then other people expanded it. But at first it was probably just one little adventure, so don't worry about creating the next Greyhawk or the next Forgotten Realms or the next Dragonlance. Just start with an adventure, and then you'll be able to figure out where the story's going and what you want. And this is the cosmology. This is some good art explaining it. I like that. The old art was more ephemeral, I guess. Anyway, so that's that, and then, you know, then we get into stuff that already was in the Dungeon Master's Guide, the magic items. So, you know, these are just updated versions of that. So you don't really need to worry so much about the treasures, because it'll be when you finish the 4-hour session and then you hand out treasure, or maybe you do it over several sessions, the treasure they've gathered. And then here's the maps that they were talking about. These are some very good maps, and you can draw your own. They're quite easy once you get the hang of it. Maps of boats. Basically, these are the basic things you would want to have as maps. And then the most important thing, just like the last time, the index. The index is your friend. You look up the thing you're thinking of, and you look in here, and it might be called what you're thinking of. It might have a different word for it. You know, you kind of got to be aware that, you know, there's things that have multiple words explaining the thing. So you want to pick the thing that makes the most sense. Like artifacts could also be, I don't know, ancient mechanics or something, or ancient structures or ancient armor, whatever. So it might not be artifacts that you're specifically looking for, or you may be thinking of, you know, like an ancient cup, but it's an artifact. So you just got to be aware that when you're looking through this, there's one word explaining it within Dungeons and Dragons, and there's multiple words that could explain it in your own head. So the point is, you use the index. It tells you where to look on the pages within the book, and so it's the easiest way to find the basic information you're looking for. This is one giant map of, I'm assuming, Greyhawk. I'm not going to open it, but anyway, yeah. So there you go. That's the Dungeon Master's Guide, coming out November 12th. It's $49.99 US, and yeah, it's pretty great. Just briefly, we'll look at the collector version, just both sides of it, in case you're wondering. Yeah, it's very nice. Same price, but again, limited printing. And same contents, it's just a different cover. So, that's the Dungeon Master's Guide, and thanks a lot, and tune into the next one.